Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. European Union leaders are convening in Brussels to discuss bolstering the continent's defense capabilities and reaffirm support for Ukraine. Germany's Friedrich Merz has proposed significant reforms to increase defense spending. French President Emmanuel Macron, meanwhile, has engaged in strategic dialogues with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán to align European positions on the Ukraine conflict ahead of the EU summit. Now, these discussions highlight Europe's efforts to address defense and security concerns collectively. Joining us today on TVP World to provide insights into these developments is Daniel Hegedüs, Regional Director of Transatlantic Trusts Central Europe. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So we are talking about the increase in defense spending within the European Union and the peace in Ukraine, where 27 members of the states will be discussing these critical issues in Brussels today. Can you help us understand what you think the results might come out of this discussion? Are we looking at anything concrete or a lot of talk as per usual?
I think we can look at two concrete subjects of this discussion. Mm-hmm. One is providing political support to the 800 billion defense spending plan of Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. So practically giving a huge boost to European defense spending, which is clearly necessary in the current security environment, and especially in light of the developments in the transatlantic relationship between Europe and the United States. And the second question is obviously related to the principle peace through strength and the immediate support the European Union can provide to Ukraine in times when the United States, on the one hand, suspended direct military aid, and on the other hand, unfortunately, also suspended intelligence sharing with Kiev. And I think we can expect potentially different results in these two fields. First, I wouldn't expect any larger opposition, not even from the part of the classical disrupting countries of the European Union like Hungary or Slovakia, when it comes to the boosting of European defense spending, strategic autonomy, and the high-level discussions on the new security environment. However, where I expect opposition, and practically it was already announced last week, is the position of Budapest and Bratislava with regard to any potential financial or military aid to Kiev. Most likely here, European member states who still would like to provide support for Ukraine must go on an intergovernmental way and find a loophole around the opposition of Slovakia and Hungary. But I think the discussion will mainly revolve around these two strategic questions.
Right, like you mentioned, security is of the utmost importance, especially at this point in time. However, traditionally, the European nations have problems seeing eye to eye when it comes to a lot of security and spending issues. And this 800 billion is not a small contribution. Do you think the European leaders have the political will to carry that out?
I think there was a shift in the mindset over the past 1 to 2 weeks, or over the months, if we calculate it actually since January 20 and the inauguration of the new American administration. I think there is a general understanding that decoupling from the United States and the security guarantees it provided to the European security order is necessary. Not because anything changed on the European side, but because the very significant and deep shifts that occurred on the American side and the U.S. positions with regards to the European security order. These shifts are unnecessary. And just to illustrate what red lines were stepped over just in the recent days, France, which over the past 10 to 15 years always refused a Europeanization of the French nuclear deterrence force, the Force de Frappe, which is actually the only independent nuclear strategic deterrence force on the European continent, actually brought this opportunity up voluntarily and unilaterally in the discussions to secure Europe in the case of a potential withdrawal of the United States from the NATO nuclear sharing agreement. So I think there is a widespread understanding in the European elites that Europe needs to take care about its own security, that it will require sacrifices from societies, from economies, in a range between 2 to 3% of the GDP in addition to the current levels of defense spendings. However, whether, especially in light of the fact that we have certain governments in the European Union who appear to be more aligned strategically with the current US administration and have close strategic ties to the Kremlin as well, the real question is what can be achieved with the decision-making procedure, which is based on unity and consent if you have disruptors in the community of European member states.
So the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has paid a visit to Paris ahead of the summit. Do you think, like you mentioned, being one of the disruptor when it comes to European countries, this is going to sway his mind in any way, shape, or form? Can we see Hungary finally getting on board with the Europeans' cause?
I wouldn't dare to make predictions which can be turned wrong just in a couple of hours. Obviously, what we have seen here is a strong leadership from French President Emmanuel Macron, who also tried to use his personal ties to Prime Minister Orbán. They understand each other rather well on a personal basis, and try to rein or buy Hungary in the European consent. Whether he succeeded or not, we will be able to see that in a couple of hours. My expectations are not necessarily positive. In my understanding, the Hungarian position was so much emboldened actually by the steps made by the White House that now any alteration from the previous immediate peace course, any alteration from the previous, I would rather say, anti-Ukrainian policy from Budapest is highly doubtable, especially because there are no real incentives on the table that could be provided to Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán to change his minds. Actually, the international environment became obviously very supportive to his unilateralist and disruptive policies. So I fear that the European Union must rather find a way around Hungary, because it will be very difficult to convince the leadership of the country to play along the rules of the European Union.
Right. And turning our attention to Germany, there's this decision to amend its debt rule to increase defense spending. But we also do know that might require a change of its constitution. Do you think that is something that is achievable?
Yes, I think if Germany was well known for fiscal conservatism over the past decades, then I think in these days the country appears with fiscal revolutionarism. Just compare that Germany and the coalition parties of the incoming or potential incoming new German government, the Christian Democratic CDU, its sister party, the CSU from Bavaria, and the Social Democrats, still in the outgoing old German Bundestag, suggested the introduction of a 500 billion extra budgetary financial vehicle for infrastructure development to compare the size to the 800 billion European defense vehicle, and actually exempted defense spending from the debt brake. This is revolutionary. Actually, these two packages together can account for 3 to 6% of the total German GDP just within a year. Whether it's feasible to achieve this will largely depend actually on the support of the Green Party. Actually, the reason for this rush is that only in the old outgoing Bundestag have the political center parties a two-thirds constitutional majority, which is required to the amending of the German debt brake, which is anchored in the federal constitution. And obviously, the Greens will ask a price for the cooperation. That price might be even larger extra budgetary spending and borrowing, for example, in the form of another special extra budgetary vehicle for green investments. But the Greens appear to be both constructive and pragmatic in their approach. I think rather a question is how it will impact in the long term the social and electoral support of CDU, because what they do now go against everything what they represented in fiscal policy over the past years, go against everything what they actually said in the election campaign, what they campaigned for. And while I am fully supporting, from a European security perspective, to these changes, it's obviously as significant shift in German politics as the Zeitenwende speech of Chancellor Scholz was in 2022. It also must be noted that it was actually the CDU which prevented the reform of the debt brake primarily over the past 4 years, and the reliance of the traffic light coalition on extra budgetary financial vehicles. So we see many breaches with past policies, and obviously to achieve these set goals of financial and fiscal reform in Germany, the new coalition parties have nothing more than 10 days. So it will be challenging, but what we have seen until now is an extraordinarily fast and smooth progress of the coalition negotiations, and actually a clear agreement between CDU-CSU parliamentary group and SPD on the fundamental necessity of this huge reform in the German fiscal policy.
Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.